let's start again. I know some of you are still trickling in. I wanted to say welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Mindi Thompson, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Liu, and we'll introduce ourselves shortly in just a moment. But today we're here to talk about internships for college students. And one of the things at CCWT that we have been focused on for a number of years, and really since CCWT was founded by Dr. Matthew Hora, is that there's emphasis on work-based learning and college internships. And so today we're going to be sharing some research findings from the work that we've been doing as a center to discuss strategies to enhance internship experiences and outcomes. So as I said, I'm Dr. Mindi Thompson. I am professor of counseling psychology, and I am the director of CCWT.
Hi, I'm Liu. I'm an assistant professor at Educational Policy Studies at TW Medicine, and I'm an affiliate of CCWT. I have been working with internship survey data, and especially regarding the alignment between student internship, major program, and their career aspirations.
And as you can see on this slide, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our funders for the college internship related research that our center has been doing for about 7 years, I believe, maybe even closer to a decade. So thank you to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the National Science Foundation, and Strata Education Foundation for funding the various research findings and the data collection that we'll be sharing today. And of course, also we want to acknowledge that although Dr. Liu and I are presenting today, some of this work is shared by and has been touched by many members of our CCWT team and community and alumni of our CCWT team who were graduate students at the time. So I want to acknowledge everyone who's been involved in this work, and this work is something that has been central to our mission for CCWT. So I want to start by just opening up a question of what do you hope to learn today? So of course you're here because college internships are important for you in some way, shape, or form. And then we're just curious to hear a little bit, what are you hoping to learn today? And hopefully we're going to be touching on some of these pieces that you mentioned. And I'll say for us as CCWT, we're always looking to improve our offerings and to really speak to and offer what it is that folks in our network and in our community are wanting and hoping to learn. So if you're willing to take just a moment and type in the chat, what brought you here today, or what are you hoping to learn today as we talk about college internships and some of our findings? Great, thank you so much. I won't read everything aloud, but I'll read through a couple of the pieces just to give us all a sense together of sort of what are some of the interests and questions in the room. So learning about what's most impactful for first generation students or for interns in general, how to support the quality of internships more than just the existence of them, what are touchstones of high quality internship or internship programs, what's currently being done to support the internship experience for students and how effective are those tools, what do students think they need more of, et cetera, how to collaborate with faculty on elevating experiences, best practices for creating communities of practice for employers, nonprofits, and education providers, hear about students' feedback. Great, well, thank you. And please feel free and continue to share feedback, share questions in the chat. As I said today, if we don't get through all of the pieces, we do see this as a series of webinars that we'll be offering on college internships and working with folks as we think more what these look like, hopefully even in the future hearing from students themselves, presenting to us about what they see or what they need. So I want to start by giving an overview of what is the perceived value of college internships. So I'm guessing many of you know these things, have heard these things. This is part of what brings you to this work and why you're here. But college internships have been determined to be and are often coined using the term high impact practice. And this is a high impact practice in that the assumption is that students who complete college internships will acquire knowledge and skills that assist them in their transition to the labor market. That internships help students to explore compatibility with chosen careers, that they allow students to develop hands-on experiences, and those experiences are in turn valued by potential employers and thereby increase what's called employability, which is basically employers' perceptions of how employable a individual is to a particular role or job. So even though internships are deemed to be high impact practices, there's been a lot of attention, even in the media, about the importance of college internships. We actually have very limited empirical evidence on college internships, students' experiences of them, what works, what doesn't, what are important factors to consider, especially with US-based samples, and especially with research that looks at students who have or have not completed internships after they graduate from college. So these are some quotes from students, and I'm not going to read them all aloud, but feel free to read them yourself. These will also be included in the slide deck if you want to see this later. But these are just some quotes about some of the ways that students themselves have described what is the value of internships for them, or what they describe as part of their experience of internships. So you can see from the first one, the internships let you get your feet in the water. It helps you understand what you're looking for in the field, if it's something you want to pursue or not. So this was something we heard a lot from students, have heard from students over the years in different focus groups and interviews, as well as from survey data, that students see internships as an opportunity to learn, is this something I want to do in the future? Is this career path a good fit for me? Is this type of position a good fit for me? The next one is, when I think of internships, I think of a new place, I think of new people, new projects, something new, and something you don't get on campus. And that's what's important, because you're in a different lifestyle, you're going to have a day-to-day different routine. So again, this really speaks to this trying on of what is it like to be in a particular professional role with particular tasks and responsibilities. And interestingly, this includes everything from, students describing even, needing to be at work at a certain time and work until a certain time, or even pieces around what does workplace professional behavior look like, and really being able to learn that and see that modeled and to practice that as an intern. The next one, your mind opens up to possibilities that you see within the field, that you get to learn where your place stands. By learning where you stand, you may learn that you actually do not want to do this whatsoever in the slightest, right? So again, we sometimes maybe have this assumption that internships are supposed to always be positive experiences for students, in the sense that it helps, they're only valuable if they're sort of right along the trajectory of their major and they fit right in, and it ends up being the thing that the students want to step into once they graduate. But actually what we hear from a lot of students is, even when they have an internship experience that is not that, right, and that it's incredibly clarifying for them, and therefore incredibly important as they think about their next steps along their career path. And finally, from being in different internship positions, I've seen a variety of leaders that people can be, and the duties and roles are for those leaders, the values they embody. And I decided after seeing this that I definitely want to be in a leadership position, right? So this is speaking about, again, some of that other more intangible modeling that can happen, that it's, this student in particular was talking about seeing these models, people they could emulate, and then thinking about how that might fit for them in the future, what they might be interested in as they move forward. And so even outside of a connection to a specific job or even career area, it was more broad as leadership roles, right? And knowing that being in some sort of leadership position in the future is of interest to me. So when we think about the value of college internships, it's really important for us to then ask the question, who is actually taking college internships? Who's actually completing them? And this really highlights, when we start to dig into this question, this really highlights issues of access to internships and lack thereof. So what we know from some data is that around 30% of college students in the US complete an internship, that high quality internships are often assessed accessed by students from specific programs or majors, such as engineering or business, and by students who have more financial, social, and cultural resources. We also know that students of color who attend MSI, minority serving institutions, participated in internships at higher rates than their peers at PWIs or predominantly white institutions. So there's something about the culture of their campuses that perhaps contribute to that higher rate of internship participation. And from one of our large national data sets, we know that 64% of students who did not take an internship had wanted to take one. And the reason that they didn't take an internship were varied. And so here are some of the reasons that students cited as to why they didn't complete an internship or why they didn't take an internship. So as you can see here, in the different colors just represent the year in which the data were collected. So this was data collected over a 3-year period. But what we see as trends are no opportunities, right? A lot of students in individual interviews and focus groups talk about how they're applying to hundreds of positions, sometimes for internships during their time as a college student, and they cannot get an offer, right? We also see some students who describe no opportunities, meaning there's no opportunities that was in the area or that kind of met the criteria that I needed for my own internship. But then there are also barriers such as lack of transportation, lack of childcare, insufficient pay that stood in the way for students to decide to accept an internship. Also needing to work at a current job. And oftentimes students were weighing the balance between I could work at my job or get a summer job for pay. And actually that's going to put me in a much better financial position than taking an internship that is either unpaid or very low pay. And of course, heavy course load, right? So we know our students are overwhelmed, and that is a reason that prevented some students from taking internships. So housing is also a barrier. I see the chat. This shows up. Sometimes it, sort of comes out under the no transportation. Sometimes it's no opportunity. So there may be opportunities for internships in New York City, but I can't afford to take an internship in New York City because I also then would have to find and pay for housing. Or that is true of moving to any new location outside of the where the student is currently or where they may have family members. So yes, absolutely, housing is also a barrier. And to the question of, is the data from four-year colleges or universities, or did this also include community colleges? This particular data set included mostly four-year colleges and universities, including PWIs, HBCUs, and HSIs. We will talk about some data we have from community colleges as well. Great question. So go ahead and continue to ask questions along the way, and we'll be monitoring and can respond to those in the chat. So next, I want to just share a little bit. These were, this is findings from interviews and focus groups with students who were attending an HBCU over a 2-year process. And these were qualitative findings that emerged from those interviews and focus groups that really highlight the entire process of college internships. So this includes some of the themes that came out were, number one, students' desire for an internship. So students wanted an internship. They perceived it as valuable. They perceived it as contributing to their desire to want to do good or make an impact in the world. And they also talked about their familial messages about internships, that sometimes those were helpful and supportive, and other times they got in the way. Because families didn't understand, families weren't in support of a student taking an internship that brought them outside of their sort of home spaces, and that they didn't maybe understand, why would you take an internship that doesn't pay very much when you could get a job and actually earn money this summer, those sorts of pieces. All of the students described the internship application process as incredibly stressful. They talked about the importance of support from others, from peers, from family members, from folks on campus, But they also talked about the limitations in internship opportunities, and there are a variety of reasons cited for this. This can be related to their major, their regional restrictions, and perceived bias against HBCUs by internship employers. They also talked a lot about how finances make a difference in decision-making, and Dr. Liu is going to dig much more into this as she's presenting some data. And they talked also about the value of internships. So some of the things that we've already talked about is why internships were perceived to be valuable. And finally, stepping out and projecting into the future, that students saw internships as a way to help them think about their future job search, help them think about how to balance work and life, and how to even vision the future and imagine themselves if they might be coping with discrimination. So this is a quote, I think, that speaks to the emotional toll that internship applications can sometimes have for students. I feel like at fill in the blank institution, they put a lot of pressure on us to get internships, but they're so hard to get. So it's very frustrating and annoying at times. Like, you can't tell me to apply for something, and then when I apply, I get an email back 2 weeks later saying you didn't get it. It's very disappointing. You're telling us we need the experience, but they're not even willing to give us a chance. And this really captures what we hear from a lot of students who are applying to internships and not being successful in that process. So here are some really practical things that we can do based on some of these findings, and things for us to think about depending on our various roles. Think about which ones of these might apply for you. By engaging in conversations with students about that family piece, right? We know that family can be both a supportive and a barrier for students. And so how do we think about how to talk with and support students in engaging their family in this internship application or decision-making process? How do we start to enlist hiring agencies and employers to buy into this realization that internship accessibility is critical, that there are major disparities in who's taking internships and who's not, and upon compensation packages, which again, Dr. Lee will talk about in just a moment. We want to enlist campuses to connect applicants to internship resources and create campus-based incentives. So for example, possibilities for tuition waivers, possibilities for stipends, possibilities for college credit, that there are ways that we can think about on campus, how do we incentivize internships and really help students get connected to them. And then finally, to evaluate the majors that receive the most and the least amount of support to determine ways to increase equity across majors.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about an important topic based on several earlier CCWT findings. And this is about paid versus unpaid internships. Internships are not created equal. That's the title of our webinar. And the first thing when we think about this inequality is that some interns are paid and some are not paid for their work. So how many are not paid? This is quite surprising, actually. The estimation varies, but also consistently high. If we look at the baccalaureate and beyond study from 2016 and 17, we'll see around 31% of all college interns are not paid. So almost 1/3 of them. If we look at our own CCWT's college internship study from 2018 to 20, which covers 14 institutions, this is not nationally representative data, and we'll see a higher percentage here. So among the participating institutions, 43% of the interns are not paid. And if we look at the newest data from the National Survey of College Internships, this is nationally representative data from both 2-year and 4-year college students, and conducted in spring 2023. Again, 31% of the interns are not paid. So these percentages are pretty consistent, and this is very high. What does it mean exactly? So how many students are not paid? If we take the number of enrollment and the percentage of students who took internship, and then the percentage of students who were not paid, and do some calculations, we'll see around 1 million students were not paid for their internship work every year. And this is not a small number. Why is this an issue anyway, right? Students learn from their internships, so why should we still pay them? Well, this is a big issue, and there are a lot of problems due to this unpaid internship. Like Mindi has mentioned earlier, first of all, this leads to financial exclusion, and to some students, when they look at unpaid internship opportunities, or when they look at overall internship opportunities, they will not be able to take internships just because they don't have the time and privilege to work for free. Right? So these opportunities might favor the elite and the well-connected students in the first place. Take this quote, for example, from an interview with the students. The reason why I never really looked into an internship was because of the fact that I thought that it was going to be unpaid. And as a full-time student and also working and paying bills, I was like, I'm not going to be able to afford to do an internship because of that fact. Like, I closed my eyes on a lot of stuff. So the wide prevalence of unpaid internship could lead to this false assumption that all internships or most of them are not paid, and that could prevent a lot of students from actively looking for such opportunities. And the actual unpaid internship, of course, a lot of students cannot take them, right? That does not mean, however, that does not mean unpaid internships are better ones. If we look at the evidence about the outcomes and evaluation, previous slide, please, sorry. We will see that unpaid positions are actually usually considered less valuable, less privileged, and they tend to be less valued, and the career development expected, and also the expected outcomes, right? And also student satisfaction all tend to be lower when it's compared to paid positions. I will talk about who are taking these unpaid internships a little bit later. But of course, there are also legal issues, right? With students taking up uncompensated work. And of course, unpaid labor is a basic violation to worker rights. So there are ethical issues as well. So now, who are the students, right, who are taking these unpaid internships? There are a lot of variations across student level, individual demographic characteristics, and also this institutional characteristics. First of all, we'll see that students interning at nonprofit organizations and government positions are more likely to take unpaid internships. Right? Students interning at nonprofit organizations are 23.7% less likely to get paid than those interns at for-profit companies. And students interning at government positions are 12.3% less likely to get paid compared to those working for for-profit companies, respectively. If we look into student demographic differences, next slide, please. Thank you. And we will see great disparity across different demographic groups. For example, first of all, there are a lot of disparity across gender group, right? Among students who have taken an internship, this is from the spring 2023 national sample of the internship survey. We see that 39% of women took an unpaid internship, while only 21% of men did so. And if students identify with another gender identity, 36% of them took unpaid internship. This is a great difference. And when it comes to racial differences, again, we observe significant variations. First of all, Latinx students and those with two or more races are most likely to take unpaid internships compared to other racial groups. So the numbers are 29% for white students, 25% for Black students, 40% for Latinx students, 21% for Asian students, and 46% for students identified with two or more races. So significant racial difference. And if we look into socioeconomic differences, comparing first-generation college students versus non-first-gen college students, again, there are significant disparity. 39% of first-generation students are taking unpaid internship, while 27% of non-first-gen students are taking unpaid internship. So overall, we are seeing that the historically marginalized groups, the already disadvantaged groups, are more likely to be taking unpaid internships. And we also know that these internships are not only unpaid, they also tend to be less valued. The outcome measures also tend to be lower compared to the paid internships. So we can expect this might lead to long-term disparities as well. And last, there is great variation across academic majors as well. Students who are most likely to take unpaid interns belong to education, social services, and health professions. This is probably partly because internships are a required component of their training in this major programs. Social science students in general, around half of them worked for free. And students who are least likely to take unpaid interns are engineering students, business students, and the more general STEM students. Right? They are at the bottom of this chart. So overall, what have we learned from this data and analysis? First of all, we need more data on internship pay. Not only paid versus unpaid, but how much is paid and relative to location, right? Relative to housing expenses, living expenses, etc. We need to know more about this. And second, we need to develop targeted interventions to the most disadvantaged group, such as women, Latinx students, first-generation students, and those working for nonprofit and government organizations, and those in major groups that require internship training. We will need to dedicate financial aid to support those students who have to take unpaid internships for the training and learning, for the experience, for the career development opportunity. Some universities and some local foundations have been doing this already. We know, for example, the City of Sacramento, Temple University, University of Maryland have some similar initiatives supporting student internships. If the student internships are unpaid, there are certain initiatives providing payment. To do this, we definitely need to build partnerships across the campus units and also with external partners. We need to end unpaid internships if possible. We should also advocate for the government to fund their internships. For NGOs, they need funding themselves. It's very difficult. And that's why fundraising and partnership could matter a lot here. And last, we could expand more classroom-based work-integrated learning opportunities to make internship experience more accessible, so students do not have to give up these opportunities because of the potential cost and the assumption that they're not going to get paid. These are what we have learned based on the internship paid versus non-paid study. And next, I'm going to talk about a bit more about student internship satisfaction and their experiences with a focus on their relationship with their supervisors. So this second aspect of inequality exists. We know students in general, data show that students are pretty happy when they have internship. The level of satisfaction is pretty high. Overall, we see 70%. This is based on, again, the Spring 2023 national sample. Over 70% of students say they're either extremely satisfied or very satisfied with their internships. And very few students say they are only a little satisfied or not at all satisfied with their internships. When we add them up, it's less than 10%. There are some disparities. Next slide, please. Especially when we look into socioeconomic differences. Students, we ask them to identify their own class, right, and divide them into upper class, upper middle, working, and lower class. And then if we look at the distribution of internship satisfaction, there are some patterns that upper class students are more likely to be satisfied with their internship, right? Either extremely or very satisfied with their internship. But among the lower class students, they are relatively less likely to report a high level of satisfaction, and they are more likely to report somewhat satisfied. So there are clearly some class disparities here. I also looked into this most updated data when it comes to gender and racial disparity, and I didn't identify significant gender or racial disparity, but the socioeconomic disparities are pretty clear. So what are the most important programmatic elements of an internship that would directly shape student experience and impact their satisfaction? So this is based on CCWT's previous research reports and a lot of previous studies, we identified these three major elements. The first one is task goal clarity and autonomy. Task goal clarity is associated with student satisfaction. Very clear task goals is positively associated with student satisfaction. This is especially true if students just started working or they are newcomer to this organization. There are some mixed findings when it comes to autonomy, which I will dive deeper into. So basically, a certain level of autonomy may be beneficial, but if it's too much autonomy, students start to get lost, and that could be detrimental. So this is the first important element, clarity and autonomy, and a good balance. And the second is coordination with academic programs. Sometimes we often assume that student internships are related to their academic major and they must be related to their future career. But this is actually not the case. There is often no guarantee that internships task will be related to the student's previous coursework or training, or it will be related to their future career aspirations. My own study using this college internship survey from 2018 to 20 show that the alignment between internship students' academic major and career aspiration are positively associated with student internship satisfaction. So a higher level of alignment across these three elements will bring a higher level of satisfaction. However, in this same study, we observe a lot of misalignment, and this varies across major groups. For example, in social science and education, and social services and health programs, over 10% of students report that their internship are minimally or not related to their major at all. And in social science and education, over 10% of students feel their internships provided minimal or no relevant skills for their aspired careers at all. So this could be a huge problem. And the third factor related to internship experience is a quality of supervision. And studies, so a lot of studies show that supervisor support, mentoring, and care are positively related to internship outcomes. And some study also looked into the racial matching between supervisors and students and found that if it's same race diets, students tend to report higher level of satisfaction than mixed race diets. So we can talk a little bit more about the key features of intern-supervisor relations. This study led by Dr. Hora and Dr. Thompson further reveal these important aspects based on interview focus group interview data. So first of all, clear communication of tasks is very important. And second, a proper level of intern autonomy is highly appreciated by students. So not too little, not too much. For example, a student say you would watch them do it initially, and then they would have you do it on your own. And they think this process is very beneficial for their learning. There's some sort of observation and adaptation going on throughout the process of internship. And the supervisor is expected to know when it is time to offer more autonomy as the intern learns throughout the program. And third, supervisor should be available, accessible to the intern. The communication should be, to some extent, intensive and frequently. One student says, if I had questions, I could always go to them. They mean their supervisor. I can't really think of a situation where I ever had a question that wasn't answered within an hour. That's when they're asked, like, what is appreciated, like, what do they think is the best, right, aspect of their internship. So they really appreciate it when their supervisors are always available to them. And of course, fourth, attention to intern learning is very important. So again, here, the supervisor is expected to adjust the level of supervision and autonomy throughout the internship. And last, the timely provision of feedback is super important. As one student mentioned, every 2 weeks, we would meet up and we would debrief and see where we are and how we were doing, and if it was too overwhelming, or if we thought that we need to be doing more. So they greatly appreciate this regular feedback process. Next slide, please. So what have we learned from this data and findings? What are the practical implications? First of all, we have observed some socioeconomic disparities, and we probably need more data and to dive deeper into this. More data and more analysis are needed. And second, we would need some intervention to help students and to better understand first, and then to help students to achieve a better alignment across the 3 elements: internship, their major training, and their career aspirations. And third, we have revealed that supervisor support, care, and mentoring are crucial factors associated with student internship satisfaction, their experience, and outcome. And the supervisors should navigate the tension between being highly communicative and attentive, and also providing some autonomy. This is a difficult task that must require some supervisors' time investment. And the degree of supervision and autonomy should vary depending on the experience level of the intern, the capacity of the intern, the nature of the work itself, and also the process of intern learning. Right? And the level, the tension between these 2 factors would need to get adjusted throughout the process of the internship. Thank you, and I'll over back to Dr. Thompson.
Thank you. And there's a couple questions that came in, and so we could pause and take a few moments and chat through these as they're fresh in folks' minds. So around one of the questions that came in is around the data about unpaid internships being less valuable experiences, or any thoughts about why that may be the case based on your analysis.
Yeah, there are a lot of possible reasons. The unpaid internships, for example, they are less, they could be from less prestiged organizations, institutions in the first place. And second of all, students might be taking these opportunities for the learning experience, but not the pay. So they are doing something in exchange for the internship experience. And at the same time, when they're giving up the pay, they're giving up a lot of other associated like factors to the internship that could come with, let's say, maybe a large organization, a large institution, a more developed internship program. And if they simply want this on their resume, right, to show that they have done an internship, they might be accepting an unpaid internship without really evaluating, right, this quality and the possible outcomes of it. There are other possible reasons, and for unpaid internship, sometimes employers might evaluate as a less valuable experience. It could be a stigma as well. Right? So we do need more data to better understand this phenomenon as well. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Let's see. If folks have other questions, please feel free to type those into the chat. I know there's some questions around sort of, do we have data that tracks certain states or certain regions that seem to do a better job of engaging and hosting internships, and which, what that might look like. And I would say, I think there's limited data. I think the data that exists that look at region by region, for example, is perhaps happening at more of a state workforce development level. But in many states, that does not necessarily include college internships. So that data, those data sets wouldn't sort of track this in a systemic way. It sounds like some of the folks maybe here in this group have ways that in the states that, or the areas that you're situated, that maybe are doing some of this tracking or are creating, as in Pennsylvania, for example, what what paid internships may be, or some regulations around those. But if anyone wants to jump in and say a little bit more about those pieces or ask some additional follow-ups, I think these are great questions. And one of the things that I'll mention in a few moments is the importance of engaging employers as a critical player in this internship puzzle. And how we can do that and how we can think about doing that as we're moving forward. So I'll say more about that in a few minutes, and we'll continue for now. And if there are more questions that are coming through, we will have some time at the end for open kind of Q&A and conversation. Great. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of what we know from internship completion and how that relates to outcomes for individuals once they graduate from college. And as I said at the beginning, there's sort of limited empirical data overall, and there are very few, i.e. about 5 published academic research papers looking at this question with US-based samples. So I'm going to really talk about 2 different sets of data that both come from our college internship study, which was a large multi-year college internship study with many institutions, 13 institutions, 8 at the 2-wave longitudinal data set time, and then 13 at the 3-wave. And what 2-wave and 3-wave means, it's just this is longitudinal data that surveyed the same students over the course of 2 or over the course of 3 years. So what we know as some of at least initial long-term impacts of college internship participation or lack thereof from our 2-year study, two-year time point data, we know, and then this is something that Ron just mentioned, that increased autonomy and goal clarity from supervisors contributed to individuals who had completed an internship, their levels of career adaptability. And career adaptability is a psychosocial construct that assesses and measures students' perception that they're able to overcome barriers, that they're able to cope with change, that they're able to sort of pivot and be adaptable in various situations. And so when we see as one potential outcome of what college internships may contribute to for students that prepares them for the world of work after they graduate, career adaptability has become a common variable that is measured because of the changing nature of the world of work. We know that increasingly students are, as they graduate, transitioning into a workforce that is quite unpredictable, that is quite unstable. And also to think about the students who were included in these data sets are students who were surveyed through the course of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So certainly an ability to be adaptive and having really strong coping mechanisms and resources is an important outcome that we may be considering as we think about what are the skills that we want to be helping students to develop. From the 3-year study data, here are some of our findings. So students who had completed an internship tended to secure employment with higher relevance to their majors. They also were 3 times more likely to enroll in graduate school as opposed to entering the labor market. So this finding is interesting, right? Because we often think about students, the importance of college internships as being connected to the transition into the labor market. But what we found in this particular set of data from students is that the students who had completed an internship were actually much more likely to choose to enroll in graduate school post-graduation rather than entering the labor market. There could be lots of reasons for this. It could be related to students' perceptions of job availability at the time that they were graduating. It could be perceptions of they realized by doing an internship, they needed more specialized training and knowledge in order to be successful in their chosen career pathway. It could also be that students who are interested in graduate school in the future see the value of internships to help them to be more successful in that process. You know, one thing that's important about this finding is, again, as we think about, as we're working with students and we're working on campuses or with employers to create internship experience, how do we make sure that we're capturing students who are also interested in enrolling in internships as a way to gain skills and competencies that will help them to be successful for graduate school if that's where they're choosing to go. It's also the case that the students who had internships were 3 times more likely to be in the mid to high income group rather than the lowest income group post-graduation. So to say that another way, students who had internships were more likely later on to report having higher incomes as compared to students who did not have internships. And so this is income from their first job post-college. We also see a number of disparities in career development opportunities and outcomes as we tracked students over this 3-year period. And what's important to note here is these differences or these disparities held even after controlling for the effects of internship. So in other words, these were across the board within the sample. So first-generation college students, what we see is that they are more likely to take jobs that were less related to their majors, as opposed to continuing generation college students. For Black and African American students who had graduated, they were 3 times more likely to take longer to find employment as compared to their white peers. So as Ron mentioned, we see a number of disparities in which students from marginalized groups are not having the same access to internships, not having the same access to paid internships, and not having the same gains from internships as compared to their peers who come from higher income, who come from continuing generation college student backgrounds that maybe have higher and more connected social networks, and from students from particular racial or ethnic group identities. So one of the things that we asked the students at the 3rd time point, so this is students who had graduated from college and had found a job, is we asked students what were the methods that they used in their job search. And as we think about the impacts of internships and potentially as bridging this gap between graduating from college and entering the world of work and securing your first job, it's of course important to think about what's the role, if any, that internships have in that process, and what are the different ways that those internship experiences may be useful to students as they are entering and looking for jobs. And also, what else is helpful for students, right? So we're interested in how do we think about the various ways that students gain access to work post-graduation. And what you can see here is that there's the red are those who did not take any internship during college, the red bars. The yellow are those who participated in an internship during college. And so we see some differences. Of course, internship is where we see the most difference, that those students who had an internship were more likely to use that as they search for, in some ways, as they search for jobs. But we also, one thing I think is important for us to know, all of us who are on college campuses or university campuses, is the relatively low numbers that we saw for students, regardless of whether they had participated in internship or not, in utilizing and accessing career services on their campuses for support in the job search process. So that's something I think we have things to do and things to continue to think through together. Also just want to mention, as I said, some of these data were from students, and this is from a sample of 554 students across the US who were completing this in 2021, 2022. So certainly in the midst, and these are students who were absolutely affected by closures on campuses, et cetera. But this is a word cloud of responses to students' open-ended question, which was, what were some of COVID-19's impact on your career plans and goals? And so it will be important for us to be thinking about what are the long-term potential impacts for students post-COVID? Have these changed? Have these shifted? Does it look the same? But we know from even most recent data, I'm in the process of doing focus groups with students on career readiness, and we know that many of these are still front and center for students. So the perception that there's going to be no or limited employment opportunities, a perception of the lack of hands-on learning or internship or other work-based learning opportunities, that there's a difficult job search ahead that they imagine with some financial struggles and disruptions. We also know that mental health is really important and is a forefront of what students are thinking about or we're thinking about. And of course, there's some positive too, like the flexible or remote work jobs that students were citing as something that they saw in response to the impacts of COVID. So to answer the question, were students able to rank order or select more than one answer? This was actually totally open-ended. So it was just a text box entry and students typed in their response. Okay. So as we think about what do we do with this, and I want to go through this quickly because I want to make sure we have time to open up for Q&A. Well, how might we design more effective college internships? So if we take everything that we've talked about so far today, we want to be really focused on supporting students. What does it mean to develop concrete skills and strategies to connect their internship experiences with career exploratory behaviors? We know that it's important for us all to engage in career exploratory behaviors. We know that it's something that if we can help students think about what that means, what the value of it is, how it might connect to their internship experiences or other work-based learning experiences, how that could translate into their development of career goals that will result in concrete action steps associated with those goals. We also know that it's important that students translate the knowledge and skills that they learn at internships to the classroom and vice versa. So this is both ways, right? We need to be thinking about how do we connect the students to where we are, where they are thinking about connecting the hands-on practical side of the work that they're doing with what they're learning at a more classroom level. We need to connect and engage with employers to co-design and to support internships that include adequate compensation packages, that include the types of supervisor mentoring and support that we know is effective, and supporting career development for students as a holistic process, that students are really attuned to their overall health and wellness and how that impacts their ability to not just engage in internship experience, but also as they think about what the world of work for them will look like once they graduate. And then finally, because at CCWT, we're very interested and our sort of mission is to center student voices. You know, one question that remains is what would it look like if we were to ask students to design their own internships? What would be the things that students would choose to include? What would be the pieces that are most valuable or important to them? So I'm going to pause here, and I know there are a few other things that came into the chat, but Ron, feel free to jump in if there's any questions that came in that you want to respond to.
Yeah, I think Kathleen's earlier question is about where the data come from about the unpaid internships are being less valuable. So that is largely based on the study using the 2019 survey of the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And the CCWT's college internship survey also shows similar results. When it's unpaid internship, student satisfaction tend to be lower. And we don't know exactly what are the mediation mechanisms though, and we need to look further into this. I think Joseph has question about selection effect. Some of these studies, we did run regression models to controlling for student level characteristics. We're showing largely the descriptive data here to make things more intuitive, but we did run statistical models controlling for individual level characteristics. I don't think we were able to, I think most of this study cannot control for student motivation though, okay? And in some studies, we're comparing within students who have taken an internship. So we're excluding students who did not take an internship. But I do think this is a very important issue, selection effects.
Yeah, and I think Amanda's question relates to this as well. So how do we account for personality, aptitude, et cetera, or other confounding variables? So in some of the modeling statistical modeling that we have used, we are able to account for in sort of control for certain variables that are potentially confounding. And those include demographic variables that students are asked. We did not, in our data sets, we do not have information. We did not ask students information about, let's say, their GPA or their test scores, or nor did we do kind of personality assessments. Those certainly would be questions for future research and things that, of course, are likely to play into some of these overall findings, right? And then important things for us to be thinking about as we are designing internships or thinking about how to design internships that meet the needs of all students. So other questions, go ahead and again, jump in. So Joseph, it looks like there's a question about connections of friends and families seem markedly lower than similar results in job search. I'm not exactly sure what the question is. If you want to either retype that or if you want to jump in and speak aloud, feel free. Let's see. Yeah, great. You can go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself and jump right in. If you are, it is not working, just so you know.
I think the question might be about, right, in the chart, you showed just now the importance of connections are not as high as this sociological study used to think, right, in your data, in our data.
Yes, now I think now I can talk.
Yes.
Yes, so that's exactly what my question was, is that Granovetter said about half, and there's other studies, more recent sort of post-internet studies that say about the same thing. And I wondered, it seems much lower, and I'm wondering, is that just because of the population of students, or is, you know, something like that? And also on the online listings and the career services, I wonder, like a lot of students, I think, use Handshake.
Mm-hmm.
And are they counting Handshake as online versus Career Center?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Those are suspicions. I mean, I think this is all wonderful and really interesting. I just don't know. And I just trying to figure out what it means.
Yeah, no, these are great questions. And I think, you know, this networking piece, one of the things that we see, and we actually, one of our CCWT members, her area of research is all about sort of social and cultural wealth, which includes the connections to networks. So one possibility is why we see it a little lower in this data set is this data set because, so first of all, it's only 331 students who responded, these are students who had already graduated and had already secured a job. So it was asking them to think about this. And it may be that this data set, because it is kind of overrepresented among students who attend minority serving institutions, is some reasons why we see some of the discrepancies from prior and or even new data sets that have emerged since that are generally a much broader sample, generally overrepresented by students who are white, continuing generation, and that come from middle to upper class backgrounds. So that may be part of this discrepancy. And yes, absolutely, I think that online listing, we did not ask students to sort of disaggregate what that means. But it is likely that some students, if they're using Handshake, even if Handshake is coming as accessible to them through their college campus or their career services, they may have chosen it as online listing versus career services. So, one thing I think about this career services piece is what do students actually know about career services? And of course, this varies across campuses and institutions. And how do we make sure that we're advertising the services we offer that students think is most relevant to them, right? And how do we get students connected? Because I think there are incredible resources. And so one of the things I see from this is just mostly wow, there's a disconnect between what we're trying to offer and what we are offering and the number of students who might be accessing what it is that we're offering. Great. I realize that we are at time. I'm happy to stay on a few extra minutes if anyone is interested in chatting more, asking additional questions.
I'm very sorry, I have to leave for a meeting at 1.
Yes, of course.
Feel free to reach out to me via my email. I'll be happy to answer questions. Hey.
Great. Well,
everyone, as you log off, an evaluation will pop up. Please remember to tell us how we did today on that evaluation. I promise it will just take a few minutes. It's just a couple questions. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you all.